The military intrigue, the giant robots, and the boy meets girl high school drama all return in a brand new season of Full Metal Panic. Welcome to my review of the first episode of Full Metal Panic: Invisible Victory. Today is a surreal moment. I never expected that they were going to do another season of Full Metal Panic, considering that the last season, the second raid, was back in 2006. That's right, it's been over 10 years since the last official anime season of Full Metal Panic, but fans are going to be excited as it is finally here. And there's no hand-holding in this episode right here. They assume that you are a fan of Full Metal Panic. There's no recaps, no reintroductions. They get right into the next part of the story. So as a fan of the franchise, I was definitely eating up every single thing about this episode. For new people who want to jump on board, you're probably going to be confused. So here's a quick little rundown on what Full Metal Panic is all about. It's about this secret military organization which goes by the name of Mithril. They're an anti-terrorist group which go up against all sorts of baddies, including their main enemy, which goes by the name of Amalgam. They travel in this massive submarine which is filled with all sorts of advanced weaponry, such as guns, planes, helicopters, and of course, giant fighting robots. This is an anime after all. The two main characters of the series are Kaname Chidori and Sosuke Sagara. They're the boy and girl of the series, and they are like oil and water, completely different from one another. Sosuke has grown up in a military world, thus that's how he views everything, in a very harsh militaristic view. Kaname Chidori is a Japanese high school girl, and thus she has a lot of those qualities. But she also has the unique aspect of being what is known as a whispered, which is a human which is endowed with all of these unique abilities inside of their mind, in terms of how to use technology and how to implement it. So a lot of terrorist organizations are always going after these whispered people so that they can get some information out of them and make their organization even stronger. In the last couple of seasons, we've basically beginning to see the relationship between Sosuke and Kaname, as it started out as a bodyguard and protecting relationship, and slowly but surely has actually transformed into an actual loving relationship. Now, a lot of the humor comes from the fact that Sosuke himself is so deadpan about everything and doesn't understand a little bit of the subtleties of what it means to be a Japanese teenager. And Kaname is there to try and teach him these things, while they also fight against terrorists, fighting in giant robots. There's lots of political intrigue, as well as secret villains from the shadows who all start to finally make their appearance in this season right here. So yeah, it's basically Japanese G.I. Joe with a love story angle, and I love this series. I've actually been following Full Metal Panic since 2002. It's hard to believe that I've been following this show for over a decade at this point, but I was always just impressed by the amazing mecha designs and the surprisingly enduring characters. And I'm not gonna lie either, I've had the biggest crush on Kaname since I was in high school, and she still looks as beautiful as she always has in this series right here. So let's get to the brass tacks. This is a direct continuation of the series. We immediately pick up from the end of the last show after the last major conflict, and one of the major characters for this arc is going to be the guy by the name of Leonard Testarossa, and he's actually the brother of this other woman by the name of Talitha, who is also whispered just like Kaname. She also happens to be the leader of this organization and is also the captain of this sub, and Leonard basically is trying to gather all of the whispered for his very own plans. What those plans are is still kind of up in the air, but basically he comes across as a bad guy. It's also worth mentioning that he is a whispered himself, and he also seems to have an odd obsession with the main character of Kaname. In fact, a lot of their interactions from the last season come to the forefront in this episode, as we get to see that Kaname is still not very happy about that kiss that he decided to give her back in the last season, to the point where even bringing it up in front of Sosuke is an absolute taboo. So this episode right here basically jumps right back into it, we get to see this tense confrontation between Telethon and her brother Leonard. Leonard, I can't believe I just pronounced that wrong. By the way, get prepared for me to mispronounce a lot of things in this series. That's just the way it is. And we get to see that Leonard is planning something big. He even goes as far as to sneaking into Kaname's apartment when Sosuke and her are returning home in order to basically intimidate her and saying that no matter what, she's coming with him, and that's just the way things are going to be. But he makes a quick escape, and that's when Sosuke realizes that they can't stay in this apartment anymore, and they're going to have to run away. In the background, the Amalgam organization, which is essentially the Cobra of the entire series, are planning something big, and they actually plan a huge attack against one of Mithril's bases, while simultaneously Leonard is actually getting ready to try and kidnap Kaname. That looks like what's getting ready to go down, and the build-up to this is just insane. I absolutely love it. Aside from that, the other big details about this episode is just sort of the reintroduction of some of the major characters of the series. In fact, I thought it was really surprising that they included some of the characters from Famufu, Full Metal Panic Famufu, which is another season of the series which is basically like a joke version of the actual show. It does take place within the actual universe, but it's an entire season which is dedicated to comedy. It's basically meant to be sort of like a little break, a refresher before we move on to the other hardcore material, because as the series goes on, it does get progressively darker, and I didn't expect to see the class president return, and the fact that he's so smart that even he realizes that Sosuke is involved with this organization, and that he's been at the forefront of all this stuff with Kaname as well. But if he noticed it, a lot of other people are going to start noticing it as well, and this is something that I think totally dwells on Sosuke in this episode right here. Not to mention, there's a lot of tension between Sosuke and Kaname in this episode that I think really works to the benefit of this episode, and just pumps the drama up to 11. Really, this was just a great introduction to all of these characters, and of course getting to see where they're going to be going from here. But like I said, the show is not without its faults, if only for the fact that it doesn't help new viewers at all. So, what's the rundown on this episode of Full Metal Panic: Invisible Victory? Honestly, it's just weird and surreal to know that it's back. I was pretty much convinced that they were never going to bring Full Metal Panic back, and they're like, well, if you want to see the rest of the story, check out the light novels, check out the manga version. They'll be there if you actually want to see the conclusion. And now we're getting a brand new season, and it doesn't even feel like it skipped a beat. I will say that the production value still looks really great. That was something that was always really striking to me about Full Metal Panic. Even in the early 2000s, it had a really great looking design to it. All the characters were incredibly distinctive, to the point where you don't see that too much in a lot of modern anime. And that trend continues in this episode right here. Everything looks distinctively clean as well. Like that opening scene with the Amalgam giant mecha going up against Sosuke's and his massive arm slave mecha looked really fantastic. Not to mention the overall designs just have this like brand new sheen to them that just make them pop just a little bit more. This is a really nice looking show, is basically what I'm trying to say. I think my favorite things about this episode, like the previous seasons though, is just getting to see the moments between Sosuke and Kaname, as it really is the cornerstone of the entire series, and there's so much tension between the characters. In the first half of the episode, it looks like they're finally about to seal the deal and have a nice night of lovin', but unfortunately when they walk into Kaname's apartment, there is Leonard waiting with his giant robot bodyguards, which made their first appearance in the last season, and I really hope we'll get to see more of them in this season, especially the way that this episode ended with all of them just appearing out from the shadows. It's just so freaking awesome. I really love it. As far as like new villains that they're adding outside of Leonard, there is one other member of Amalgam who is sort of being the replacement for Gowron and Gates from the previous seasons, and I can't wait to see if he's going to be as memorable or as intimidating. They're really tough acts to follow. The villains of this series are so over-the-top and theatrical that they're just really fun to watch. But this episode had a fantastic ending with a really great cliffhanger, and I can't wait to see what some of the action in the series is eventually going to look like. This is a series that I think really excels in terms of its mecha action, and the second raid looked really good. This is 12 years later. I can't wait to see what sort of improvements they're going to make when it comes to the big robot mecha scenes. Frankly, I'm just excited that Full Metal Panic is back and that people can experience it again For people who love the franchise, this is the biggest thing they could have possibly wanted, more of what they love. And if you want more Full Metal Panic, then you have got to check out this show. If you are interested in the franchise, I highly recommend checking out the first season and at least the second raid if you want to jump into the third season. It really is mandatory viewing if you truly want to understand this world and the characters that live in it and the dynamics between all of them. But really, this is a fantastic continuation of a very underrated franchise, and I could not be more happier that it is back. So there it is. That's my thoughts on this episode of Full Metal Panic: Invisible Victory. I'm giving the very first episode a 5 out of 5. I had no complaints with it. As far as wanting the story to actually continue, I'm super happy. I would normally give this episode a 4 out of 5 for the fact that it does not ease in the new viewers at all. But, I mean, that's not the point. This is the next season of an ongoing story. It's not like a weekly anime series that runs forever that eventually has to do a recap episode. And if they'd have had done a recap episode, it probably would have disappointed me. But for them to just jump right into this, man, I am excited. So there it is. That's my thoughts on the episode. I would love to get your thoughts, though. Did you guys watch the brand new episode of Full Metal Panic: Invisible Victory? Are you familiar with the franchise? Have you watched any of the previous seasons? What are you excited to see in this brand new show? And tell me about all your favorite moments and characters in the comments section below. Let's start a discussion, guys. Thank you guys so much for watching this review. I'll see you guys next time. And as always, stay damn down, baby.